All right, so I have a question here from a student here in 24. This is homework 6, section 2.3, number 10. So there's a little bit of, I guess, confusion as far as how to get your vertex or complete the square on this. So let me go ahead and go through the steps. Um, First of all, you get your revenue function by distributing your x through here and then putting it in descending order. That means highest power of x down. So the first thing you do is you factor out your greatest common factor, because in order to do completing of the square, you have to have a coefficient of 1 on the x squared term. That just means that I can't have a negative 4 in front of that. So I factor out a negative 4. When I do that, I'm left with an x squared. Now here, you could say I'm just going to divide 95 by 4 and figure that out as a decimal, but then you're going to have some trouble when you add and subtract that special number. So the book says to figure out what this is as a fraction or an integer. So when I factor a negative 4 out, I need a negative here, because I know that a negative times a negative will give me the positive that I need there. Okay, so I know I'm going to need a negative. And then all I do is I put the 95 and then divide by 4x. Now what that does is when I multiply through by negative 4, again, negative and negative will give us the positive, and then the 4's will cancel, right? There will be a 4 here that'll cancel, and I'll get back 95. So by just dividing 95 by the 4, I basically get what I need, and that would match up with this if I distribute it back through. So here's where we are. Now what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to look at the number in the middle here, 95 over 4, or I should say the number in front of x, and you're supposed to take half of it. So when I take half of that, that's the same as taking negative 95 over 4 and multiplying by 1/2. So dividing by 2 is the same as multiplication of the reciprocal. So this gives me negative 95 over 8. Okay, now what I'm supposed to do, take that number and square it. So when I square that, let me see, squaring that number, I get 9,025 over 64. So this is kind of like my magic number that I'm going to use. So I'm going to rewrite my revenue function, r of x equals negative 4. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different than the computer. I think this is a safer way to do this problem. Okay, watch. I'm going to add a number here, and then I'm going to subtract the same number here, and then close my parentheses. So I'm doing that all inside of the parentheses. They do it a little different, and I think it's confusing, kind of confusing, the way that they do it. So basically I'm adding 0, right? These two together should be a 0, so I'm not changing the problem. So what I'm going to add here is the 9025 over 64, and then subtract 9025 over 64. Now, let me grab my calculator here. I wasn't prepared. What we know is this. It is guaranteed that the first 2 terms here, right here, first 3 terms, are guaranteed to factor to be a perfect square. In other words, I have r of x will equal, I have my negative 4. Now watch the way I do this. I'm going to do a big set of parentheses. Now these 3 terms will factor to be x, and then it'll be this number here, always. So minus 95 over 8, and then squared. So if you were to take this right here, and if you were to square it, which means you'd have to FOIL it, you would get back these 3 terms, and that is guaranteed. Now I don't need to show that. That's just part of the completing the square process. But what I still have here is the minus 9025 over 64. Now I'll close my big set of parentheses. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute the negative 4 through here. Oops, I don't really want it to look like that. It's going to go in front of this blue parentheses, and then it's going to multiply times this number. And when I do that, here's what I'll get. R of x equals negative 4 sitting in front of x minus 95 over 8. And then a negative times, I have my negative here, times a negative here will give me a positive, so plus. And then when I multiply through there, the 4 and the 64 will reduce. Let's see, 4 goes into 64 16 times. So I'll have 90, 25 over 64. Now this is the form we're looking for. It has the form of a function that looks like ax minus h squared plus k, where hk is the vertex. So now all I have to do is identify what h and k are. Now h for me is going to be, the way I tell my students is, you look at the sign in front of that number. The h will always be opposite of what you see. So if it's negative, it'll be positive. So h here will be positive 95 over 8. And k is not opposite of what you see. It's exactly what you see. So k is 90, 25 over 6. Oh, you know what? I forgot to put 16 here. Oops. I put 64 again. Don't know why I did that. 16. Okay, and then that's your h and k. And then from that, you should be able to answer the rest of the questions. I don't recall exactly. It wants you to find the output that produces the maximum. That would be this. And then it wants to know what the maximum revenue would be. And then it wants to know the price. So you have to go back and plug this in, plug this value, which is your x value, into the price function. And the price function in this problem was, let me see, 95 minus 4x. So if you plug 95 over 8 into that, then you get your answer. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully that helps. See you later.